Hello, hello. We are back. Some of us are back. Oh, wow, Daniel, that's really.
Hey,
Can we get gallery view mode on, Mishka? I don't know if everyone should be able to see Daniel's face right now. That's
just trying out the new Zoom feature.
excellent. Well, we're back with another live feedback session with top 50 projects on Pioneer. As per usual, we have applicants from pretty much all over. They've asked specific questions. A bunch of them have asked for product feedback, landing page feedback. Others have marketing growth questions. Andrew, you want to get right into it?
Let's get started. Alrighty. Let's kick this off. Give me one moment. Okay. Can y'all see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. Let's get started. So the first one that we have is Cardinal. And it looks like their question is, which KPI should they prioritize at this stage? And what pain point have they personally experienced around traveling that they think should be prioritized? Let's take a look at what they do. So their business travel booking. Okay. I've never heard of the mixture of business and leisure as leisure before, but that's a pretty cool pretty cool combination. All right, well, first off, this is a pretty nicely designed landing page. I think it's clear what you do. It's well organized. Good combination of, I like your little graphics. Okay, cool. So the first question, what KPI should they prioritize at this stage? So it looks like you've launched based on your landing page. It sounds like active users is probably the best. I would probably track a mixture of both the number of users and usage. So for example, the number of trips that are being booked on your platform every single month, as well as the number of like monthly active users and other retention and other stuff that goes into it. Feels like the right KPI. In the early days, it's probably not the most important thing to optimize something like revenue just yet. I'm not sure how far along you are, but based on this, it seems like it's early, like recently after launch. So it seems more appropriate to optimize for acquiring your first users and making sure that you're solving a real pain point for them and they're coming back. So yeah, those are the two things that I would look at: monthly active users, the retention around that, and the number of trips that they're booking through your platform. I guess the second question is around what is like a personal pain point that you've experienced around business travel, I suppose. And it's a good question. I personally probably haven't traveled as much as someone in like the consulting industry or someone who travels like every single week for their job. The main things are probably around reimbursement is probably one pain point that I think is pretty common. If you're not using a company card, what's the timeliness that you're reimbursed on your travel, like receipt tracking and submitting that for reimbursements and all that sort of stuff. It's probably one of the main ones. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. And I guess expense tracking during the trip. This is again assuming you don't have a company card or anything like that. But if you want to track your expenses while you, in addition to like the flights, like I don't know, your transportation and food and all that sort of stuff, that's probably one of the main pain points that I would look at. And it also looks like you're focused geographically on Africa. So I'm not sure if there are specific things that your users deal with in Africa that are different than, say, like what I would deal with traveling from New York to San Francisco or something like that. But if there are a few, I'm not sure what the exact pain points are here, but an example that I can think of is if more people in Africa, for example, transact on cash, then the expense tracking and invoicing would probably be a larger pain point in Africa than it would in the US, where I'm assuming most of these people are going to be paying for almost everything in, card and whatnot. So that's like one example. You're going to get better answers for that from talking to your users than I can tell you around, Africa's major business travel pain points. So yeah, that's the first one. Let's hope that was helpful. Let's move on to the next one. Next one is Loopify360.com. And their question is, what do you think of our model of exchanging growth marketing services in exchange for equity? What other models would you suggest to scale this solution? Okay, so it sounds like you're a marketing agency for businesses in Africa. And your question is, what do you think about this model? And do you think we should change it? So like an agency model, I think is an excellent way of building a business. Like there's nothing wrong with building an agency. I think it's a little bit different than say like a traditional venture scale tech startup where people can expect to grow in different ways just because agencies by definition provide services in exchange for money. And I think the difficulty of scaling that like, super quickly is because you'll always need additional human capital to get money. And that's harder to scale than something like software just because of like, marginal cost. It's going to cost money and time to, design a campaign for a new company compared to if you just gave them a piece of software and didn't have to worry as much about it. So I would say it depends on your goals for your business. If your goal is just to create, a profitable business that you can make good money on, and like that is kind of the end goal. If you're going to project out like 10 or so years, there's nothing wrong with creating an agency. In fact, I think it's probably like the right move to do for a lot of these kinds of companies. If your goal, however, is to like raise like venture capital and like grow like a company that's going to end up being larger in revenue, larger in valuation, that sort of thing, then it's a little bit harder to do that. Well, it's significantly harder, I would say, to do that as an agency or as a consulting company, just because you're never going to be able to grow as quickly compared to a software company that's competing in the same space. Granted, you fulfill like different niches, right? Like software company is building software to sell. Like let's say you're building like marketing campaign software where your edge is plugging into someone's data warehouse to make it easier for them to run a marketing campaign, or building them like the emailing or texting software that they can use to track their outbound and whatnot. That's going to be a different kind of business that can grow much quicker because of the nature of lower marginal cost, fewer people to work on a project and that sort of thing. So it really depends on your goals at the end of the day. And it's more of a question for what you want for your business compared to like, what you, more of what you want for your business rather than anything else. And the second question around like, what do you think of the model of exchanging services for equity? It's kind of the same thing. I think it's a perfectly fine model. I think maybe like even if you wanted to mix up that like payment upfront plus a bit of equity, I think that makes sense. Especially because you're working mainly with startups and small businesses. It's a nice way of indexing on the ecosystem in Africa, if that's something that you're bullish on. But again, I think the same thing holds, where the difference is less so around the specific model that you adopt and whether or not you're an agency versus a software company. So again, if your goals are, to more of like a lifestyle business, then I think that model makes total sense at the end of the day. Hope that was helpful. Alrighty, moving on to our next one, which is archivetech.com. What's the best way to approach as many investors as possible, especially the big ones? Oof, this is an interesting viz. Trying to read the code on the screen. I just saw some form labels. One-click way for providing AI solutions. Discover our artificially intelligent services. It looks like this is a chatbot creator or chatbot agency based on the metrics that they listed. Yep, smart conversational chatbot. And let's take a look at, they have a smartwatch that provides security. That's interesting. Okay. So it looks like this company creates chatbots. They do some R&D to do some other AI related things as well. So this autonomous smartwatch. I'm not sure exactly what an autonomous smartwatch means. I've never really thought about the description of autonomous when I think about like, watches compared to like cars and such. But okay, it looks like the main product here is chatbots, if I'm not mistaken. So the question here is, how do I approach a large group of investors? So fundraising is a complicated thing in and of itself. But the simplest advice I can get for approaching investors is that it's a lot better to go to them with a warm introduction if possible, compared to, say, like cold emailing a bunch of investors. And the reason for that is investors get a lot of inbound, and they kind of pattern match to sources that have worked in the past. And for whatever reason, the sources that have worked really well in the past have typically been referrals from other people. And so they treat those channels as like, high signal, just like you would if you're like a marketer that you're going out, or if you're a salesperson and you're going out and you have a bunch of channels and a few of them have returned, a lot more money than other channels. Odds are you're going to spend a lot more resources on those channels than you would on some other ones. And that's kind of what it is for investors, where they will end up, looking at a lot of warm introductions or referrals from other people, and they'll focus more on those channels compared to cold reach out. So as a result, a lot of if you email a bunch of investors, odds are it's going to be hard for you to get a response or to run a process through that. So I think it's important. So I would say on the strategy side, get warm introductions where possible. Look at your network and see, and just basically ask all the people in your network for that might be connected to somebody for instructions and such. That's my advice on the getting investors' attentions piece. On the personal piece, I would recommend making it a full-time thing for one of the founders, where it's kind of hard to both run your company and actually fundraise at the same time. I made that mistake when I was working on my own business, and you kind of end up doing not a great job in both. So if you can focus all of your attention on fundraising and make it your sole main purpose when you're in fundraising mode. And the third piece of advice I would have here is more specific to your company, where it looks like you do a mix of things and you're also doing somewhat of a consultancy model, where it looks like I'm not sure if you're creating these chatbots for people or if it's like a pure software kind of thing. I think that it might make sense to kind of narrow down the scope of the business. It looks like you do a few things here when you go and fundraise, just because it can be a little bit confusing if you're pitching both a chatbot and a smartwatch and maybe even some services things on the side. It can be difficult to get that across in a pitch when you're going to fundraise, especially if you're going to VCs that kind of want a more especially for a company that's in the early stage, they more likely want them to solve a very specific problem than trying to do a bunch of things, including like services and that sort of thing. So that would be my general advice here for you on the fundraising side. All right, moving on to the next one, which is a virtual flow, where the question here for you, Daniel, is should I make a web app at this early stage, or should I continue focusing on mobile?
Well, thank you, Andrew. First, we should just understand what this is. It's a 3D body scanner that somehow also has a marketplace, which is an interesting intersection I haven't heard before. And so, yeah, still not exactly clear what that would do. But anyway, that's not the question. The question is whether people should make a web app or focus on mobile first. I think the traditional answer used to be in the early days that if you can get something done in a web app, you should definitely do that because it's much easier to do than a mobile app. But of course, we're no longer in 2013, 14, 15, where you had to making a mobile app was really hard. It's gotten much easier now with much of the React Native stuff and even some of the low-code tools, low-code, no-code. So I would pick whatever is best for your market. This seems to me like it's actually, there's some very important mobile code that's important. Because I imagine, if you're using, thank you. I imagine if you're using the mobile smartphone camera, maybe there's some type of LiDAR or point cloud scanner thing here you don't quite have on your desktop camera. Either way, it also seems like there might be a mobile app already. But I think, given how easy it's become, or it's definitely easier to make mobile apps, so you should pick what's necessary. The other final thing I should mention is a huge amount of internet traffic at this point is just mobile. So And now as I read the question, by the way, one last time, I see that there's a really an endurance question here. Should I keep focusing on mobile? Like as if I'm trying and it's not working. So really maybe the question is, how long should I keep working on something if I'm not getting any traction? The answer is that I think more often than not, people give up too early, not too late. So hopefully this can be a good nudge in the right direction. Andrew, would you disagree? I mean, I guess my question to you would be, what is the point at which you would tell someone actually don't make a mobile app, make a web app, even if what they're doing kind of makes more sense on mobile, if any?
It would definitely be post-launch. My understanding of this website is it looks like they haven't launched yet. It's not like based on this. I remember actually exchanging an email with this founder where I asked about the MVP. I think they launched something, retracted it, and went back to building. And I think certainly, if I were to decide between a mobile app and a web app, it would be after I've launched at least one of them and seeing how it performs. So it sounds like that's a question for after one of those things. Let's say in this case, your mobile app has been out in the market for a while, and you've kind of seen how people interact with it, and maybe the traction numbers aren't what you want, or retention isn't quite there. I would ask yourself around at that point, like let's say after a few months, the app is been out and about, before making a decision of whether you should build something else. Just because like in kind of the same vein as like, don't give up too early. I think you can't really make a judgment call on this. Like obviously in the very beginning, you decide whether you should make a mobile app or web app. I don't think once you make that decision, you should stop like halfway and then switch to the other one. For whatever reasons, I think it's better to get that data, real world data, and launch it rather than make the decision pre-launch.
Makes sense.
Alrighty. Sounds like we're ready to move on to the next
switch
one.
over to Sendoff.app. And their question is how to get paying users. They have loads of interests and downloads and add to carts, but no conversions. And this seems to be find everything for a funeral on Sendoff. Why don't you hit shop now for a second? And let's go catering. Okay, yeah, it sounds great. Pick anything. Danish.
Danish sandwiches.
Wild Danish sandwiches. Add to cart. Exactly. All right. So we don't have to convert at this point. But anyway, the kind of meta point is you need to spend time. I don't even think you need to use any of the fancy analytics tools. I would just sit down with a bunch of people and just do exactly what we did with them and see where they get stuck. And you could reach out to existing users. Now, if it's the actual family that's dealing with the deceased, there's it's a bit hard to have interview people in that moment. It's obviously a painful moment, but if it's for people related to those folks, so you might be able to grab them. Them obviously will be in a bit of a different emotional state. So I would just do like a classical funnel analysis, but in person. I mean, I guess you could also go look in Google Analytics, and there is probably a way to get to a quantitative answer there. But I think if you just sat down with your users 10 times, you get to, an overall answer. I think the product overall makes sense, and we can probably give you all sorts of nits and suggestions on how to make the flow a little bit better. There was a lot on every page, but I think in general, as any founder, you could just try and I would go through a very polished conversion flow, like GoDaddy.com would be an example, and learn all the lessons from there. Very, very little information on each page, extremely focused, value proposition, very forward. So I would just pick a bunch of companies that, are very SEO optimized, Booking.com, GoDaddy, those types of things, and buy something on there, or almost buy something on there, and then reapply those lessons to your site. I don't know, by the way, off the top of my head, that this makes sense as an app, because I think hopefully this is a one-time thing or an infrequent thing. So I can't really imagine someone having an app on their phone unless they run a funeral home for buying stuff like this. So, you know, it should probably look great as a mobile website, but I don't know that it necessarily needs to be an app.
Okay. All right.
All right. Next up, we have Univents.
That's landing page feedback. Oh, wow.
One app for all of your events and experiences. So overall, my rough experience, yeah, I mean, first of all, you got the landing page feedback from Andrew right there. Oh, wow, is a great reaction. I guess this is Eventbrite. This is a kind of Eventbrite, which is a good idea. I would say the landing page, when you first land on it at the top, I mean, it's pretty, which is nice. You know, you have these people making paper airplanes or whatever, which is nice. Yeah, this little, I don't even know what to call it, but this type of kind of AWS product offering thing is popular in vogue now. It'd be nice if you, I personally find the call to actions that are book a demo a bit lame. If you can do something better, I don't exactly know who the customer that you're most appealing to is. If your value proposition is that you white label everything, and so therefore you know, Univents, ultimately people buying tickets never see Univents, then I guess you're just working to sell to organizers and whatnot. If your value proposition is that people buy tickets on Univents and see it, it might be worth showcasing actual events people can buy. So, and I would recommend not white labeling, by the way, and definitely doing that. And so I don't really see why you should go a different path than Eventbrite. But it's good. I would say, you know, there's obviously some small nits here, like the like your header is not properly aligned with the rest of the text, but whatever, you guys can figure that out. I don't really know what uni people means. I think it could be one of those things that make a lot of sense to you guys because you're thinking about it a lot, don't necessarily make sense to other folks. It would be good. My final suggestion would be to try to, you guys have, I imagine, a long diatribe about why you're better than existing event ticketing platforms, and I would try to pick, I would go through that diatribe with like 10 friends and ask them what stuck the most after you explain it to them, and then put that on your homepage. Because right now you're saying it in very vague words. You make it 10x more efficient, 10x this, 10x that. That's not specific enough. So I think overall it's a great start. I think you could probably be a bit more specific about why you're better. And you should really make it very succinct.
Yeah, one other.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say one other piece of feedback I have. I just wanted to check Eventbrite site to take a look at it. Based on your copy here, like one app for all your experiences and events, and we make finding and organizing events 10x faster. It sounds like you're trying to appeal for two different customer bases in the same sentence. Like the app for your experiences is what you would like want for, but actually finding experiences is something that I would want as a consumer, but organizing events is something that an event organizer would want. And it sounds like you're in the same sentence, you're saying both of you can do this, but it can be a little bit confusing because it sounds like you're addressing the same person, given that you're doing it in a single sentence. And I think one of the strategies here, which is why I wanted to check Eventbrite's site, is appealing to making the copy tailored to like one of those target customer segments, whether it's discoverability for the consumer or ease of organization for the organizer, and then having the other thing, you know, on the side. So what Eventbrite does is they focus on the consumer and say, discover great events, but then they have, you know, this little thing where organize, like you can organize things too as kind of the secondary copy, where it's clear that once I hover on this part of the landing page, that I am an organizer looking to organize something. Whereas on everywhere else on the page, I'm a consumer looking to, you know, go to an event. And that's one little bit of feedback that might help simplify the communication here, because otherwise you might get both consumers and organizers coming to your page and asking themselves if this is for them. Whereas I think it's better to have one of those parties come to your landing page and be like, oh yeah, this is for me. And based on the secondary copy, it sounds like it might be the organizer that you're going after here. Where if you're going to like, if you're a consumer coming on one of these sites, like Daniel said earlier, the first thing that you would want to see is like a list of events that you can attend when it comes to discoverability. So that's my just a little bit added nuance on like the landing page here. So, all right, moving on to the next one, where we have Fiskian. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Fiskian. The social files app. And their question is product feedback. Yes.
Yeah, all right. So this is, I don't really know what this is. I guess this is like rapid share kind of. Is it Reddit, but the root item is a file maybe instead of a link?
The social files app, that sounds like it would be correct, where people submit files and then there's discussions around that.
Yeah, I guess it's interesting how one would make that successful. I mean, traditionally, I think people on the internet obviously like to have discussions about, I guess to the extent that I would want, it would be interesting to think about how you just dethrone Reddit, which I think is a good $10 billion question. I don't know that files as the root is the way to do it. But if I had to do that in a legal way, so obviously hosting illegal content's interesting, but illegal. But if you wanted to do that in a legal way, there are those subreddits like obscure PDF, and they just have like odd files, I guess, that people speak about. And so you could reach out to those mods maybe and see if they would be interested in something like this. But you tend to have this network effect challenge where, Reddit's probably not great at a lot of things, but it's just good enough at so many things, and people have a login and an identity there. And so it's quite hard to dethrone. But I think it's an interesting idea. I mean, these social networks come and go, and Reddit's, coming of age. It started in 2005, I think. So, when something enters it's almost entering its second decade in existence. It's definitely time to think about alternatives. I just don't exactly know. Yeah, I think you'd want to think carefully about how to shape files around that. I don't have an idea off the top of my head. Andrew, maybe you do.
It's also not immediately clear to me why files is the right thing to organize like a social discussion for, like social discussion around. Like Reddit's whole thing is like, links, social media, it's like posts from other people. Files are like, obviously something else, but it's not like clear to me why this is like as attractive of a thing to get the people come and discuss, that want to come and discuss and so on and so forth. Because it feels like if you wanted to discuss books, for example, which is, I'm so sure, like one of these things I saw was related to books, you would go to something like a Goodreads where the discussion is organized specifically around something like books. Files, it seems to be like, you also have images, right? As files where, I don't know, Imager or Pinterest or many of these other places are places that are organized around discussion for images. So it looks like being a file somewhat, I don't know if it restricts you in terms of the scope of what you can accomplish here, but I like Daniel's train of thought around like if you were to design like a Reddit replacement, I'm not sure that's the direction that you want to go in, but if it was, is this the rendition that you would go for? And I don't think it's clear to me either if this is the way.
All right.
All right. Next one for me is chasing time English. And the question is, how should we balance content building with marketing and growth during the early stages of development? That's a great question. Let's see what y'all do. Chasing time English. If I had to guess based on the website, is it language learning? Original TV drama series with interactive lessons for English language education. This reminds me of just the random references. Like there was a telenovela that I watched in Spanish class growing up in like elementary school, middle school, that was geared specifically for the same thing. It was like language learning for Spanish, and it was a like a telenovela specifically designed for that. I wish I could remember its name, but that's cool. So quality content that helps people learn English. Very cool. Okay, so the question here is content marketing versus content build, like creating content versus other like marketing growth needs during these early phases of development. When you're thinking about growth, right, it's like a channel specific kind of thing. Like you could do paid acquisition, you could do social media, you can optimize your site for SEO, you could create content, there's like basically an endless amount of things that you could do as a growth person or as a marketer. And your job is to basically, you know, get people into the top funnel for the site. And one of the things that I struggled with was like, how do I prioritize my time between all these different channels? And I think the right way of doing it is to start broad and then figure out what's repeatable and create engines for that. So what I mean by that is you want to start by looking at examining all your potential channels. So in this case, like I said, it could be content, it could be viral, it could be, you know, social media or any of these other things. And you want to look at the performance of each of these channels. Let's say social media performs here, content performs here, something else performs here. And the way that when your amount of resources is limited, you want to automate as much of this as possible. So you can do things, for example, if you notice that social media can be automated, and has pretty good, you know, results in terms of getting eyeballs, you could basically queue up like, you know, 50 social media posts over the course of the next like 2 months or so, and kind of let that run on autopilot or something along those lines. Similarly with like SEO or paid or something like that, if you notice that for paid acquisition, if you notice that like for every $1 you get in, you get $2 out, then you can pour like a lot of more money into channels like that. But the important thing here is to explore each of these different channels in the beginning and see what works, because you might be surprised about what works better than others. For me, the surprising thing when I was working on my thing was that organic actually was the best performing channel compared to something like paid. So what we ended up doing is optimize a lot of time on SEO, on content and backlinks that pointed back to our website. And basically that was like, you couldn't really automate like the content creation piece, but you can automate a lot of the stuff around like the SEO piece. And that's what we ended up like spending most of our time on after exploring all those different channels and putting some of the other ones on autopilot. So yeah, basically as like a startup founder, your time is limited and you would obviously like to dedicate a bunch of time into all these different channels. But given that you can't, I would start broad, figure out what works well, automate what you can, and then focus your time on the best performing channels, and not worry too much about the other ones. So yeah, that's kind of what I would say. And given time, like once you build out your company, you can find more people and bring them on board to specialize in each of these channels. By all means, do that. But when your resources are limited, you really want to be smart about how you're spending your time there. So, really cool idea though. I hope I can remember the name of the random telenovela that did this for Spanish. All right, moving on to the next one, which is what do I think is the best commercial avenue for this project? Dog fooding, direct to consumer, B2B. So the question here, it sounds like monetization. Like what's the business model that I should pursue here? Football predictions and data API. That's cool. I wonder if this is American football or football. So using our advanced football predictions API to build your football data or tipping website. I can't tell if that's a euphemism for gambling or something else for tipping. Okay, continuing down to blah, 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 800 leaks, updated version API, predictions, access, okay. Okay, so you can use it to build a betting service, a data platform, live score results service. Okay, got it. Okay, what's the best commercial avenue? That's a good question. So let's think of the obvious ones. There's like providing this data to bettors, like is like if you're like a sports bettor and you're already like gambling, I'm presuming on a bunch of different platforms. and you want to improve your model, then that's like kind of one avenue I can see you going after, where you target the people that are the professional sports bettors. And that's more of a, I mean, that's more of a direct to consumer model here. That's not immediately clear how big that business is, or if they already have kind of have their own models for this already, where I'm assuming if you're making a bet on one of these things, you have some sort of model that helps you predict the match result or over-unders or team goals, or now that I know this is soccer, football soccer, and all that sort of stuff. So it might be a little bit tricky going after direct to consumer if you assume that all these people kind of already have like sophisticated systems for betting on these things. So you have an API, consultancy. Yeah, it looks like you're really kind of exploring any which way that you could monetize this sort of thing. Okay. That being said, I don't think an API is the worst approach here, because as an API, you could basically plug into both consumers and businesses that would want to use your API. So an API like first approach like has appeal to different like, you know, to both professional gamblers or sports bettors or businesses or otherwise. Is that the best way to monetize something like this? So it sounds like you have two things. You have the data that's coming from a football field, like the raw data, and then you have the algorithm, which helps you make predictions. I guess the classic thing here, like I know this is like if you have a better model, trade on it, don't sell it. But if your model is performing really well, I mean, the natural like monetization strategy for every successful hedge fund out there that has alternative data is not or a better model is not to sell that to another hedge fund. It's to trade on that and make money. So I guess like you get the classic, oh, if you're so confident in your model, just trade on it yourself. Don't sell it to other people. I guess there's not really that much more that can be said about that. I'm sure that this is an approach you've already considered. So, and if you don't want to go down that route, yeah, I mean, API makes sense to me. Trying to think if there's any like B2B angle here that would make sense. I guess going back to the two things you have the model and you have the raw data and you have the model. I would imagine that a B2B model of like selling the raw data to people that are trying to build applications in the sports analytics world is one. Another thing actually is kind of like the analytics angle of like going to teams. Like this is a little bit weirder, but like you can monetize by going to football clubs and selling this data and insights back to them and working as like all these places of in-house analytics. And I'm sure that the data that you have or the model that you have are probably useful in terms of maybe less so on targeting like the team goal and the betting aspect of it, but like things like the reason why you have this prediction is because this person was out of position at this time period and whatever, right? So if your model is explainable, then the analytics angle is actually maybe pretty interesting, as I'm sure that becomes marketable both to football clubs and to all of the sports media, which I'm sure would love to have access to that sort of like ESPN or and that sort of thing. So I feel like they would probably like that stuff more than the pure model betting stuff, which seems a little bit less directly monetizable. So yeah, we've come up with a few ideas in this little brainstorming session. Hopefully one of those resonates with you and points you in whatever direction that you end up choosing. So, all right, moving on to the next one, which is which strategy would you follow to get more downloads? And I have 2 links to go to. And user retention, what marketing channel do you think is most suitable for this company? So let's take a look at these 2 links. So basically, it sounds like the question here is growth and retention and marketing channel, growth, retention, and marketing channel. I'm not sure what this is. Oh, app MVP. Oh, excuse me. It sounds like, oh, I need to do this from my phone if I wanted to get an app. So I'm just going to focus on the landing page here. No, so I'm just reading to see what they do. So compare different transportation options and then choose the one that you want with a mixture of public transportation. Yeah, So it sounds like a mixture of walking, public transit, and maybe like a scooter or something like that, all into a single app, is kind of my understanding of this app. Okay. Okay, I think I understand what's going on here. So the question is, get more better downloads and better retention. I mean, this is like a kind of a talk to users kind of question, specifically for the retention piece too. Like, why aren't users continuing to use your app after like a month or 2 months? That's a question that's going to be best answered by having direct conversations, sit down with your users and ask the ones that left, hey, why'd you leave? And ask the ones that stick around, hey, why'd you stick around? And ask yourself if there's like something that's missing in your application. Maybe the people that leave decided that, they didn't want to use smart mobility anymore, or they wanted to focus on, use another app. And I'm sure there's plenty of answers there when you talk to the users that churn. So I think the retention question can be best answered, not from me, but from the users who have left. Your question for acquisition, how can you get more users? It sounds like you are appealing to people that are probably already using like mobility solutions in a city and kind of want to choose from other options. So, I mean, I guess it would make sense here to look for commuters, for people that are using scooters or are using other forms of public transportation and getting this app in their hands. And like, this is not a bad, like, obviously you can do this online, but this is also possibly an on the ground kind of solution here of like, I'm sure the people that are using public transit are self-evident in the fact that they're using public transit, and you can go after them and ask them to use your application. That might be one way of getting new users. It's not scalable, but in the early days, it would be, in my opinion, a pretty good way of getting users, especially for a kind of physical based, a company that's focused on like, physical moving and that sort of thing. So that's been my feedback on the user acquisition and the retention piece. Talk to users and try different like channels to where I mentioned the channel of like potential offline acquisition, which goes into the second question is, which marketing channel do you think makes the most sense? To be honest, I don't really know the answer to that question of like which marketing channel makes the most sense. It's kind of hard for me to answer, like say, oh yeah, paid is obviously the right way to go about here, or like organic makes the most sense. I don't really know the answer to that question. I think it's really different for each and every business. You guys have like the sustainability angle to this that make it easier to generate content and to get user interest that way. But my recommendation, similar to the company that I saw before this, is kind of the same. It's like, try the different channels and see what sticks. I mean, it's hard for me to say like this one channel is definitely going to be better than the other ones. In this case, you could even try offline in addition to paid, organic, social, and content and all the other ones. But yeah, it's kind of hard for me to answer that question just like off the rip. I don't know if Daniel, you have anything else to add to this one around the question of like, what's the best marketing channel for my company?
Yeah, that sounds good.
All right. Moving on to the next one, which is for Daniel, which is Fitgame.io, and they want landing page feedback.
All right. Okay. Interestingly, I think you can, I mean, I can kind of, my mind can figure out what this is mostly by the image and by the idea that it's a startup. I find the text actually doesn't really explain it that well. I mean, I get the sense that this is some type of fitness app that will use computer vision somehow to track your movements, and there you go. And so that's pretty revealing. The video is really helpful. The text at the top is not. I would make the text at the top more descriptive if you can, to just explain. I would probably just have something say, an app that uses, I don't know, computer machine learning to give you a great workout or something like that. This homepage is very long, as you can see Andrew scrolling through it, and we're not at the bottom yet. So I'd probably consider, well, even if you don't want to remove anything, you can make everything tighter. You have a lot of padding and space. So I don't know if you have some type of flex box thing that got a little too happy, but or whether this is all hard coded, but I'd make everything tighter. The actual value propositions are interesting, and no one's really done this properly. So I'd say it's all good. I would just make everything a bit more dense, and then I would make your headline text much more clear. I find the general checkboxes of like red, 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 green, 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 infomercial style stuff pretty useless. But that's just my own opinion. Let's click on Arena for a second to go to the header. Is there anything interesting there? Yeah, so everything's significantly too big and too padded, I would say, on this website.
Oh, but I'm zoomed in. This is the actual look at it, but I think the same feedback still
Yeah,
holds.
it's still,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah. Everything you need to know, I think, is probably not a great use of text. You could probably put something else there right before the video. See it in action or something like that. And the video is good. I would consider that one of those homepages that are just auto-playing the video. You have the benefit of a very visual product. Seems like the video is just someone scrolling through the homepage, but we saw some type of point or matrix map. Yeah, something like that of just the person with the skeleton dot attached. I think on the homepage, I think would be super revealing. So if you do anything, I would do that, and I would change the text in the homepage. That's it. All right.
All right. Moving on to the next one. Go tinybox.com. And the question here is.
It's an omni-channel marketing question.
Yes. Thanks for the summarization. Tinybox. Most affordable and easy to install tiny house. It's a really nice looking tiny house, just throwing that out there. I like all the different backgrounds and colors. Okay, so yeah, the question is hard to commit to people. How do you?
So their question is they got this tiny house stuff, and they obviously want to sell the tiny house, but they want people to get like a kind of experience with it first, and so they're thinking of creating their own Airbnb, and they're worried about operations. I guess my question would be, can you just use Airbnb? Like, can you just rent these out profitably on Airbnb, and then at every home just have a little postcard that says you can buy this home? I'd consider doing that. I'd probably not create my own Airbnb platform. That seems like a giant hassle. And so I would do that. And if you don't even want to worry about like working the property, there are these companies like Avant Stay and blinking on them. There's like 6 or 7 of them that will work the property for you if you just plop it somewhere, and they'll host it. They'll post it on Airbnb and the 6 other, Airbnb like platforms, and take care of it for you. So I'd probably do that. I would definitely not build your own. Your job is to build these tiny homes that look nice. Yeah, I think
homes look really cool. Is echoing Daniel's sentiment here? Like, what's the lowest cost way for you to run the experiment of getting people in the door? It's definitely not creating your own Airbnb. And I think Daniel's right in that just sticking this on Airbnb is probably the easiest thing, because they already have discoverability and all the other stuff that you need to get people into these tiny homes. So yeah, that's definitely the route. I would go further and try to go on like all those different platforms. Like there's Hopper, and I'm sure there's many other like versions of places where you can stick these things to get visibility. But yeah, I am now attracted. Like, I like these tiny homes. They're very cute.
Yeah, there's a big, I think it's in a lot of people's nighttime fantasies. All right.
All right. Moving on to the next one, which is Sweettricks.com. Would you use it on your own website? If not, why?
It's an analytics platform. That's one thing we know.
Respects your privacy.
Platform that respects user privacy. Right. So this beckons the interesting question of, is privacy kind of like a painkiller or a vitamin? And I don't know. exactly how this is. I think, unfortunately, it's more of a vitamin. I have not seen people not go to websites because those websites use Google Analytics. There might be some odd, like GDPR European thing where you can't use Google Analytics on certain websites unless users consent. If that's the case, maybe that's something you guys can take advantage of. But I think ultimately webmasters really want their products to be successful. And until people stop browsing websites because they have Google Analytics on them, which maybe 0.01% of the internet does, I think it's going to be hard to sell privacy. I do think that if that happens, you would have a real leg up on Google Analytics because they would really struggle to do that, because Google, I think, mostly offers Google Analytics because it helps their customers buy more targeted ads, so it generates more revenue. So I think you could very effectively counter position against them. I'd say for us, I mean, Andrew, I'd be curious to get your shake in a second. I don't know that we use it until our users really started complaining about GA, and to date, that number has been 0.
Yeah, it's something that I've seen a bunch of companies attempt, and like Daniel said, the whole vitamin painkiller thing, it doesn't seem that, like, it seems that people, funnily enough, it sounds like if I were to look at the macro level, people saying that privacy as a category is becoming much more important and people are becoming more privacy conscious and all that sort of stuff. At the individual level, I don't see nearly as much adoption as would suggest, like, the macro level trend. Which is a bunch of people saying privacy is more important, where you don't really see people switching off Google Analytics or Mixpanel or any of these other tools that collect user data in such ways. So yeah, it's kind of hard for me to say that we would use something like this, just because I don't think at the individual level, when people make these kinds of decisions on which products to use, right? I don't think privacy is the number one thing that they look for. They probably look for some sort of set of features that are important to them to calculate, like retention and traffic and all that other stuff. And it looks like you guys do this, but it's kind of hard to be, feature complete as another company that's been there for a while. And my guess is most users are going to be looking to those things as the higher order bit when making decisions compared to user privacy. Where they ask themselves, like, do our users care about this at the end of the day? And probably some of them do, but is it significant enough to impact your decision when you evaluate different analytics providers? And I still think we're kind of at the answer that is no. If I were to position yourself in this space, like, I might look for, like, there's probably other things that you do differently from other places that make you more attractive than purely just the privacy angle. And my take so far on these analytics companies is maybe it makes more sense to focus on the other things that make you different and better than the privacy thing, if you think that would resonate more with users over the privacy thing. Of course, we could be completely wrong, and it might, maybe we're only like a few years out from privacy being coming a reality of how people make decisions. But I don't think that we've seen enough data so far to make us believe that. So, all right, I think that's all of them.
All right.
Work today.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Rishi. Hopefully this is helpful to folks.
All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Over and out.
See ya.